the whales won't reach you. You got to reach them. So
I know, exactly. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed about that, but anyways.
Yeah, that seems kind of weird. I don't know what was going on there.
I think that we're starting to have some participants already. So I am very excied about this.
I seem to be having a very strange thing going on with my jacket. Weird. I don't know.
Maybe try to take it off.
I think that we're starting to have some participants already. So
is that better?
Oh, it's better, yeah. I think it's better.
I guess it must be the material was acting funny on the video. Anyway, that's a number 5 fluke humpback, so that means black. Tom knows that by now, I hope.
But what we want to know is what is the name of the whale?
Yeah, well, that I don't, because I haven't been there in a few years. So, but I know that the humpbacks have increased.
Looks like a John Doe.
Fluke Doe. Yeah. So I'd much rather be in Mexico right now than sitting here, but okay.
Yeah. Are you in Yucatan also, Lucia? No.
I can't hear her anymore.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been like talking and saying a lot of things. No, I'm in Guadalajara, but Regina is in Mérida. Rex, I was asking you if we're ready. We already are at the 5 p.m. Mark, so I would like to start. Let me know when you're ready.
So far, so good.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I would like to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this exciting Q&A session of the incredible AI for Biodiversity Masterclass that was launched last year during the AI for Climate Global Forum. We really hope that you have all had a chance to watch it and that you have a lot of questions for this group of experts. My name is Lucia Troches. I am the director of the AI for Climate Global Forum. And this event hopes to bring together experts to deepen on the role of leveraging AI systems to tackle environmental issues and climate challenges. We are also live streaming this session on YouTube, as Regina said. So you can find the link in the chat below, and you can share with us your questions via Zoom or via YouTube. Today, I am so happy to present this great panel of people. I'm going to start with Tom Landry. He's the Senior Advisor of Partnerships and Business Development at CRIM, and he's actually the mastermind behind this masterclass. We were talking last year about how we could create this masterclass to be part of the Global Forum, and he's the one that organized it to happen. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tom. I'm going to also introduce Richard Sears. He's the founder and president of the Mingan Cetacean Island Study, MIX. And you probably know him for his incredible work to identify individuals of different species of whales and their migratory patterns. And this is done using photo ID and satellite tag tracks. And lastly, Samuel Foucher. He's the senior researcher at CRIM as well, and he spoke about computer vision for image recognition and presented an incredible case study about multi-species detection and identification of African mammals in aerial imagery using convolutional neural networks during the masterclass. Thank you so much all for being here. They are here today to answer all the technical or theoretical questions you might have about the masterclass. That includes the techniques, the method, the technologies, or anything really you want to ask them. Tom, Richard, Samuel, thank you for being here again. And I would like to start by giving you a chance to say hi to our audience. So I would like to start with you, Tom.
So hello everyone, thank you Lucia for the nice introduction. So I'm very pleased to be here with you to have a discussion. What I've been preferring to be with you in Mexico for the event, but that's the next best thing. So I'm really glad also to have my collaborators, my longtime collaborator Samuel, my teammate, and Richard. We've been collaborating with him for a few months now at CRIM, and really excited to tell you about these use cases, these case studies, and other things we're doing at CRIM. So I've been working at CRIM for the last 15 years now. So I'm a senior advisor there. That's I do a bit of everything, but I'm not the scientist necessarily here. I facilitate the work of scientists such as Samuel and Richard.
Thank you so much. Samuel, you want to go on?
Yes, so hello everybody. So my background, I'm a senior researcher at CRIM. My background is mostly in remote sensing and image processing. So in most of the projects I do the analytical part, and my collaborators usually do the acquisition on the ground. But I will try to answer questions about operations the best I can. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. Richard? I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. See, I was saying I'm the least technically skilled person in this group, and I proved it. But anyway, so I go out in the field and collect data on different large baleen whales, particularly the blue whale, finback, humpback, and minke. And I was able to luckily meet up with Tom and others there at CRIM, because we have been for a long time trying to figure out a way that we could have computer assisted matching of the images of these different species, because each individual of each species has unique markings that allow us to identify individuals. So that's how this all came about.
That's so wonderful to hear. And thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And just a quick note, if you speak Spanish and not feel comfortable with English, you can ask a question in Spanish and we will be happy to translate for you to our guests. And I'm going to say it in Spanish. En español, si alguno tiene alguna pregunta que quiera hacer, por favor háganla con gusto. La pueden escribir en el chat, la pueden escribir a través de YouTube y con gusto vamos a traducir la pregunta y la respuesta con nuestros invitados. Okay, now let's get to our Q&A. So we have a couple of questions from the AI for Climate team, but I would like to encourage everybody that is here to ask questions if you've seen the masterclass. And we also received a couple of questions from people that saw the masterclass and sent us an email. So we're going to be sharing those as well. So I'm going to start with a question that popped between us at the AI for Climate team, and it's for you, Richard. What has been the biggest challenge with satellite tagging? We saw in the masterclass that sometimes tags fall off, and we want to know what this means in terms of research, resource, and operations.
Well, okay. There are two different types. I'll start by saying there are two basic different kinds of tags. There are some tags that are much longer than others that can be implanted in the muscle of whales, and we chose not to go that route because we feel that that can lead to infection and disease. And actually in Baja California, where I have spent some time looking at blue whales, we did see some swellings on the side of animals from tags placed by other people. On the other side, we use much smaller darted tags, which we try to shoot into the dorsal fins of animals. But the problem with tags in general is that you fire them into the blubber And the blubber is not like the mussel in that it's very easy for the tag to dislodge just in the movement of the whale through the water. But we're hoping that with some slightly longer prongs, we can get the tag through the dorsal fin. And in that case, we should be able to get several months of data. So the problem is the large tags can possibly cause infection. The shorter tags don't last as long, although we have had 6 months on one occasion and 3 months on a couple of occasions. But in general, you might not have more than 20 or 30 days. So that's a problem because the tags cost a certain amount of money.
Thank you so much. And now I have another one for Tom. How can we identify when to use AI methods and which would be the best one to say for photo and image recognition?
That's a great question. That's something that we try to do at CRIM when we advise people. We tend to look at the data first and try to do everything we can before resorting to AI. Basically, sometimes we know about the state of the art, much easier method, much lighter method. If we don't have to use AI, if it's too big of a tool to solve the problem, we do not recommend it. Maybe Samuel has a more detailed explanation on that. He is the one usually looking at the data and looking at the state of the art and recommending stuff to users. So Samuel?
Yeah, you need to check the quality, also the resolution of the data. Not all the resolutions are good for AI, especially if you want to identify the species. You need pretty good resolutions, I would say a few centimeters. So it depends on the task you are looking for. If you are looking just for counting, I suppose 50 centimeters to 1 meter could do the job. It depends also on the kind of animals you wanna count. So it's really a trade-off between what are your objectives and what is the available resolutions from the various sensors you can use.
Thank you so much to both of you. And now this question goes to everyone. So whoever wants to jump in, feel free. Is there a known level of uncertainty in studies like this one that are applied to biodiversity, image recognition, computer vision, sound, or speech recognition?
Well, it depends what you are calling uncertainty, but usually the data is very variable. So let's say you can have different lighting conditions, you can have different background, you can have also motion from the sensors. Let's say if you are using UAVs, drones, you get motion blur. You'll get lensing effect from the camera usually. So the borders of the images will be slightly different. So all those effects, when you accumulate them, you create a lot of variability that creates uncertainty in the outcome. So it's really the variability in your acquisitions and the source of images that you are using that is creating most of the errors and uncertainty in the results.
And then a follow-up question to that. Oh, I don't know, Tom, if you want to
maybe just wanted to add that sometimes when the objective is to accelerate or automate or ease the work of people in their workflow, so just like Richard, the manual matching of that, sometimes we don't need a very, very high certainty method. If you have something with a medium to high quality of result, accuracy, you can provide a workflow, an acceleration of the workflow, meaning that you provide your best guesses, and it's already better than looking manually into the database. So sometimes it's not as an operational perspective, it's really about helping people to work faster.
And I would just add also, I mean, when we're in the field, we're endeavoring to get the best quality pictures each time we're out there, whether it be from a drone or from a boat. And that means having the right lighting and having the right angle to the animal, depending on which species we're working on. because that's vital to us, even before we get to computerized matching systems. So all that has been vital for a long time, and anybody who works on large whales will tell you the same thing. That's one of the most important aspects, so that you can be certain of who you're looking at, and that you can do population estimates or things like that based on being certain of the identity of the individual.
And then I also have a follow-up question. Would you say that there are disparities with other use cases? So have you, like of course, when you're using artificial intelligence to recognize these individuals, you're gonna have like a specific error margin as well. So have you found that the disparity between this and other use cases is wide or not that much, or how do you feel that happens?
Well, I can start. I think that the two type of errors are what we call omission and commission. That you are missing some of the individuals and you're creating false individuals. So at some point it becomes detrimental to the tool when you have, let's say, too many false positives, because you have to deal with them manually and reject them. So if you are surveying a large area and you have many thousands, let's say, of false positive, it becomes very tedious to filter all of that. So the tool becomes almost ineffective. So I would say it's a trade-off between having too many false positives per images and missing some of the individuals also. But it's always a trade-off.
And then Samuel, following up on that, I think the case study that you share about multi-species detection and identification of African mammals with that use of convolutional neural networks is fantastic, right? And please thank Alexander for letting us talk about his work as well. We would like to know if you found, these disparities as well, but what would you recommend to improve the reliance and trustworthiness of these techniques then?
I would say it's more data set, more diversity in the data set, because we are starting from pre-trained neural networks. So we are doing what we call fine-tuning. We are starting from a computer vision-based neural network, and we want to adapt it to our data set. So ultimately, the neural network is not 100% derived from our data set, because we don't have enough data to train from scratch, as we say. So a good way to improve the performances is to increase your training set. And I'm talking about millions of samples, possibly. And in our training set, we are in the tens of thousands of samples. That's the scale. But we need to multiply by one order or two order to be able to train a highly specialized neural network for our problem.
Thank you for that. And we also know, of course, Jerome was part of this masterclass and he was not able to join us today. But I would like to know if any of you could tell us more about the cost-benefit relationship of leveraging remote sensing with AI techniques, thinking that in many cases, Earth observation and remote sensing is the most common practice when it comes to understanding ecosystem fragmentation and land use, and when is it really necessary to use other AI methods, and is it worth it?
Yeah, so it's a complex question. It depends on your logistic and your operations on the ground. For instance, for drones, it can be complicated, let's say in Africa, to deploy drones on a large area. And it can be costly also. You can use also planes. Planes are costly, and also they are not, they don't give a an idea, what we call an idea view of the ground. They give an oblique view of the ground, so it's more complex to analyze. And also very often the data is not georeferenced, so it adds to the uncertainty. The third source of imagery is satellite, but satellite resolutions can go down to about 30 centimeters for some of the commercial satellites, which limits the species recognition depending on what you're looking for. And also you are susceptible to the cloud cover. So in Africa, usually you can have a high cloud cover. So you may not have the data you want at the time you want. And drones are pretty good for that because you can deploy at the right time your drones and have good acquisitions at very high resolution. So drone is a good vector of acquisition for most of our problems.
Maybe there is also to
think
about the operational perspective of it. So having drones, it's something you need a special operator for it, or you can train people to fly it. If you are doing a camera trap, it's something much easier to understand and maintain, and probably the cost is lower, and maybe there are expected patterns also. And in the case of Richard, he's on the sea taking his picture with his own cameras and so on. So it needs to be a bit of everything, and it depends a bit on what is your personnel trained on. When you use Earth observation, satellite information, sometimes you need specialists to pre-processing it and make it available. Sometimes it's not the same type of resources or experts you will need.
And I'll also add that when we're taking pictures just in the field, we have 3 people that must go through to ascertain whether or not it's a match. So that is we find that that's enough to be able to be certain. And if there isn't anything conclusive, we throw out that image. So it's not used. And I'll just come back to what was said earlier about the use of drones compared to planes. Planes, the other factor is they move much too quickly. And with a drone, you can slow it down right over an animal, whether it be a land animal or a whale. And what we found it to be very useful for was we were interested in answering the question as to what was the frequency of scarification on baleen whales. And because we felt that we were underestimating contact with fishing gear and ship strikes. And so using drones, we were able to get very high resolution images in a very controlled manner. We have the altitude and the speed and the angle and all that. And it actually even brought us to add the images taken from drones to the photo ID aspect for certain species, because we noticed some marks we hadn't noticed when we were just working from the water. So I think it's as a tool, and all the other things that were said are very true. You have to train people and so on. And also over water has other problems. If it goes, it's bye-bye for most of them, although there are some newer drones that can float. But anyway.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a really complete answer from all of you. And we have the first question from our audience. It's from Justine Boulin. She says, hello, everyone. I'm Justine, AI developer and whale seeker and a former student of Samuel. I'm happy to see you both, Sam and Tom, even if it's in virtual. And I have a question for Samuel. One of the challenges you mentioned was the separation of individuals in dense herds. Did you explore approaches to improve the identification in this context?
Actually, it's an objective of Alexandre for the next few years to explore techniques adapted to herds, because most of the object detection techniques are using bounding box. So when you have a dense herd, the bounding boxes are overlapping when the individuals are very close to each other, and it creates a source of uncertainty in the counting. And usually when operators are manually labeling the images, they use dots. They don't use boxes. They put a dot on the individual. So we are looking at neural network that are based on the center of the individual, what we call center net neural network. and approaches that have been used for crowd counting. So in video surveillance, they have developed neural networks to count people in a video surveillance medium. And it's a different architecture, but you basically put a dot on the individual that gives you an estimate for very high density population, let's say. But it has never been used so far for animals. So we are looking at that in the next few years with a few students in collaboration with University of Sherbrooke.
Maybe I can add, thanks Samuel for the answer. Maybe I can add that when you're doing innovation, sometimes you have to take what's best in the field and bring into the other. So Samuel already mentioned video surveillance. That's a pretty explore use case to see people in surveillance video and isolate them. So we've done that at CRIM for several years now. For instance, my master's project was on sports science, trying to determine high-speed skater with overhead cameras. And segmentation was always a problem. If you can spot their head, that's fine, but sometimes you only have a blob and you need to separate blobs. So 10 years ago, it was a very challenging problem, and I guess it's still very difficult to have systems that very reliably segment moving targets, basically.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. And then, we were talking about data and how more data sets will help with reducing the risk of error, right? And last year during the forum, we also talked with Dr. Tanya Berger-Wolf and Topher White about the role of public sourced image from social media and community science, mostly involuntary science, right? And the reliability of these sources of data. What do you think about these sources of information to inform, let's say, whales monitoring and tracking, Richard, or species identification in Africa, Samuel? Do citizens get involved, and how can we invite them to also get more involved, if that's what we want as scientists?
There's one thing I will say. I think it's not just a question of more data. That's always good in our view, but I think it's also long-term data. And one of the things that people like us have been lucky enough to have is we've been doing this for 44 years or more. And so when you have data that spreads out over that amount of time, you get to know about reproduction in animals, but you can also verify your data against data. In other words, you can be certain of the identification because you're building up better and better quality in the photographic catalogs. Now, to answer your question about citizen science, I think that's what it was. Yeah. I think that's very useful. We have some people that have been with us who are not necessarily biologists, but who have shown to have aptitude for matching images, before Tom and company get going. But so we've had some people that are very, very sharp at seeing mistakes or changes in not in pigmentation, but in scarification on the animals. And so there is room for people that are serious about this and that have an aptitude for it, for memory of pigmentation patterns, to help a great deal with matching. And I think from what I've read, there's a similar kind of thing that goes on in Africa. Maybe I'm mistaken, but yeah.
There is a good example also.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
Yeah, there is a good example also. Even in Canada, you had people from Ocean Networks Canada. One of their leading citizen science innovation is pretty much that. They have so much observation that they need the help of people to say, was there a fish or a starfish, which kind, what frame is it? And having a lot of people that can go in it as it was some kind of a game and having best scores of annotators. So sometimes it's citizen science, it's relying on the brain and eyes of people to help you get somewhere. Sometimes they're paid for it. Sometimes it's a game and they get points. But yes, in some of these segmentation, identification, location tasks, having people looking at it and clicking on stuff is you can kind of have to have that.
Yeah, I think it's.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say that it's not just having good images and good data. It's also to have good annotations. at least for supervised, what we call supervised learning, we need a lot of good annotations. And it takes a lot of manpower to annotate. And I think it's the next stage is to develop platform where people can annotate, let's say, satellite imagery or drone imagery. It's coming. It's coming for what we call proximal imagery, let's say, taken by a photography, taken by a camera, and people have been annotated those kind of images for a long time. There is a platform called iNaturalist, where people have contributed a lot of images, and they have been annotated collectively for animals, for plants, and now we have hundreds of thousands of images for many classes. But we don't have that yet for satellite imagery, because most of the images are copyrighted, at least at very high resolution, because they are sold. It's a commercial venture. But as soon as we will be able to have a lot of free and open images, that will open the door to have crowdsourcing and collective annotations of those images.
It sounds like a good challenge for people who own these satellites and these images, right? Like, give us some free high definition images so we can actually save some species and monitor them, right? Okay, so we have another question from the audience. Rodrigo, he says, you all work with image recognition. What is easier in terms of training, recognizing individuals of a species or recognizing the species itself?
I would say that recognizing the species is probably much easier, because individuals have variation, and you have to have, as we've said, good quality images to be able to tell them apart, which is vital to, it's really the foundation to a lot of the work that we do in the field and to produce papers and so on. So yeah, I would say that to be able to define individuals is more difficult, and it's more important, the most important. I mean, first you got to get the species, obviously, but then each part of we have catalogs for each species. And depending on the species, some are a lot easier to identify as individuals than others. I mean, if I take a species like a minke whale, it's people will pull out their hair trying to figure out ways of matching those. And I'm sure that in Africa, there's probably some example. I remember talking to somebody about spotted hyena, and they said, well, these hyenas, they disappear in the brush. And I go, yeah, I understand that. Ours disappear underwater.
Yeah, that sounds like a good challenge as well. There's another question that I have, and this one's for Tom. What can you tell us about the readiness level of the AI techniques and algorithms that you work with at CRIM? Are we on the road of some major advancements, some breakthroughs, and what is missing?
Well, you have to know first that where we are located at CRIM, as we work with universities, we have our own researcher, we do technological transfer. So most of the time, we want to have an advanced prototype, something that is reliable enough, so we're confident that it can be made into a product, but we don't do products. So that being said, we're confident when we have some techniques in front of us that it can become a product. We'd like other people to come and take those products and put them into the market, into the industry, and to operationalize them. So we do have in our portfolio a lot of those techniques and a lot of those trained models that can clearly be of use. But when you want to put it in production, so maturity level, it's not the reliability is not only does it say it's the right individual, or it's always is it reliable? Will it crash? And how do you detect its crash? And is it fast enough? Is it reliable? So it's also the computer engineering that goes with it. The important part also into the transfer of that is the packaging aspect. Meaning, if we work, for instance, with Richard, we can say we have a nice trained model. Look at this; 80 something percent. It will help you get faster and faster, but how do we deliver that to Richard? How do we package it so we can install it or have someone help to install? The packaging aspect, the distribution aspect of the application is challenging, but this part at CRIM, at least we're working on the standardization of packaging of application. We're doing that with the Open Geospatial Consortium, for instance. So we know that when we have some trained model, some process, some method, we know that it will be packaged as for industry standard.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing a lot of this product go into market as well. And there's another question we have also from the AI for Climate team. Bioacoustic data tends to be collected by scientists. Is data being shared? That's one question. And then the other question we have is that we know that Jerome said in his masterclass as well about the importance of open access to data and data sharing. We've talked about this a little bit, but what are the main challenges in this sense, and how can we tackle them?
Are you
specific question?
But are you specifically talking about bioacoustics?
Yes, bioacoustics.
Okay, well, I'm not an acoustician, but I would say that for the most part, the data on acoustics is shared, although, you know, it's shared in conferences and through papers. I'm not certain about the amount of sharing that goes on, but because we're looking at whole ocean basins, without a sharing of data, you're not able to identify different groupings of whales, whether it be sperm whales or blue whales or humpbacks. So you have to be able to share because each group might have a slightly different dialect. We've seen that with the killer whales on the west coast of Canada. And so I think that that's vital to be done. And so you have many collaborative projects that go on, whether it be acoustics or photo ID or genetics, or, you know, it goes on and on from that. And so now you have a case where you have sometimes this many authors at the top of a paper. I mean, it's just because everybody is collaborating to be able to get answers to things that are very wide ranging in subject.
Maybe I can add another aspect to it. I discussed with one of our researchers at CRIM, Gilles Boulian. He's a researcher in speech technologies. And I asked him about bioacoustics. So if we are to agree that speech is one form of bioacoustics, where we are biology made and these are sounds, there is a good community in the speech recognition and speech transcription. A lot of data is shared. The databases are not missing from what I hear. So a lot of training we can do a lot of training to detect who is speaking. Is it a man or a woman? Sometimes we can infer some emotion in the voice, but the data sets are pretty well known and pretty well shared. Of course, you have the big companies, we know about them. Maybe they have a lot of data, better data, but if they want to publish on the state of the art, they need to refer to the same base data set that everyone else has done. So it's good news for the speech, the bioacoustic speech. Gilles also told me that for more general in the animal kingdom, sometimes they're missing some species that we would take for granted. He had an example for bats. There were a researcher that looked at work was done in bioacoustics with bats, and he was surprised to find not much or almost no data at all. So it depends of what animal or what bio you're looking for. There is good news and some more difficult challenge depending on the species.
Thank you so much for that answer.
One more thing that there's with bioacoustics is that very few, some of the best systems for picking up, for instance, marine mammals are run by the United States Navy. So you can imagine the United States Navy doesn't want everybody listening to their systems or knowing how they work. So there are very few people that have had clearance to be able to get into these specialized rooms where they are able to see, you know, everything that's going on in the water column. So that can be a break on the exchange of certain data. But because systems are becoming more and more accessible, people are able to do some of that work on their own without relying on the Navy. But still, that can be a problem.
It sounds also like a very interesting challenge for some students as well that are going into right now, like the field of bioacoustics and understanding how they could tackle these challenges. There's another question. Tom, the work you're doing with indigenous speech recognition is also mind-blowing. And we want to know how you measure the accuracy of these AI techniques to locate keywords in speech recognition. Do you work alongside the indigenous communities to confirm that the words are correct? And what would you say to inspire more people to work with these communities that are a fundamental part of any country that has them?
Thank you for the question. I'll be careful answering about accuracy because that's a slippery slope for someone who's not a researcher. But again, I've discussed with Gilles Boulian at CRIM, and he's the one that's been driving force about those state-of-the-art technique for speech recognition for several indigenous languages here in Canada. Of course, the work is done in collaboration with indigenous communities. It was managed by the National Research Council of Canada, so it was a part of the work packages. So yes, there is a committee, including people from the indigenous communities themselves. It's annotated, so that you have a ground truth on which to rely, and then you can do your training. About the accuracy, what Jill told me is that, and I believe it, it's much easier to spot keywords. So if we are to speak and each time we hear the word whale, it pops up. This is the easy part. This is the reliable part where it can be 80 to 90 plus % of accuracy. What is difficult is to transcribe what is been said and to actually said, here is the sentence that Tom said, and then here is what it means. That the accuracy is much, much lower when you try to go into full run-on sentences. So spotting part of the speech, keywords themselves, or phoneme, very small bits of sounds. This is easy and can be very reliable as a system.
Thank you so much. And this is our last call for questions. We have another one from Justine, so I'm going to read it out loud. But this is the last chance to put your questions in the chat here or via YouTube. So Justine asks another question about the well identification. In this context, of automatic identification, how do you manage the physical evolution of an individual whale? When a new scar appears, for example, how are we training the database and the algorithm update? I think this one's for Richard, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but I think it's more, I mean, what we do is very simple. We just monitor, we make sure that even if we know an animal, we take pictures every time that we go out during a season and of course, year to year, because there are scars that appear on these animals. Sometimes they're very minor scars, sometimes they're quite severe. So that permits us to monitor the health of the animal over time. But as far as how to deal with that on a computer, I think I'll leave that to Tom.
And then I pass it on to Samuel.
Samuel, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a complex issue when it's what we call continuous learning, when you want to develop a machine learning model that is able to evolve with time, and it's hard to handle because you want to make sure it's still working with the old data set and it's working well going forward. So yes, it's a challenge, and for sure you need a good data set to be able to track changes over time, which is not always the case. Sometimes you are missing samples and your performance will drop in that case because you're gonna mix up individuals. So yes, it's a research challenge, and it adds to the uncertainty that we mentioned at first, that it's creating more noise and more confusion into the model. But long-term training is a challenge. It's very often we have a snapshot in time for the training set, and we have no guarantee that it will be able to perform going forward.
And then I'm sorry, I'm gonna do a follow-up question that might be not such a good question, but I'm curious about it. So I'm not technical at all. I'm wondering, like, is this training for the machine learning algorithm, do you put the data set that has pictures of scars on whales, or is it like a specific form? Or what type of images are this so that you can train them, for example, for these types of injuries? I don't know if that makes sense at all.
I'm not sure if I'm the one that's competent to answer that question, because it sounded like it was a computer related one again, but
yeah, I can help on this one. Usually for each, it's like a database. So for each individual that has an ID or a name, you have a collection of pictures. And when a new picture is presented, you're trying to do a match between your exemplars. Exemplars are the picture in the database and the new picture. So you have what we call a similarity function that will give you 100% if it's completely certain that it's the same individual, or less than that if it's a very difficult image. Or as we said before, we have new marks on the individual, let's say, so that will decrease the matching score between your exemplars and the new sample. So it's really like a database with, example images that you're trying to match to new samples.
And hopefully, even if there is a new scar, the score will still be high enough. It would be in the top 10 or top 5, but it will go lower because there would be a change. But hopefully the system would be able to pick up those things that are very similar, that haven't changed. And then you can probably set the new reality of retrain, say, for now, these are the exemplar with a big difference, which is the scar.
I mean, for us in the
That's
field,
wonderful.
If a scar is severe, it helps us identify the individual. If it's only if the scar is minor, there's degrees of trauma. So we've noticed that on blue whales, for instance, if it's a very light scar, scraping from a net or something, but it will tend to disappear over time. So it's important to monitor, and that could be a problem. But if you have a deep trauma where the pigmentation, the pigmentation of the animal has been extirpated, and you have a deep gouge, those tend to stay over time. You still have to monitor them for changes in coloration, but it can actually make it, I hate to say it, but it can make it easier for us to identify the individual depending on the severity of the scar.
No, thank you so much. It's wonderful to understand a little bit more about it. And I think with that, there's no more questions. So I think with that, we're going to close this session. Thank you so much for being here again. And thank you all for the questions that you asked. We learned a lot, at least I learned a lot today. Thank you for taking advantage of the professors that are joining us today. This has been an amazing session, and we hope you all enjoy it. Remember to follow the AI for Climate initiative, as well as CRIM and Mix. You can find their links in the chat below and in the video description on YouTube. And please send us a message as well if you share this class with some classmates or your friends and family, and they have questions, and we will make sure to pass them along to the experts in this masterclass. So I don't know if you have any final messages, Tom, Samuel, Richard. I will pass the microphone along, and then we can close the session.
So yeah, so thanks a lot for inviting us. It was a very interesting experience to share all of that with you, to organize the thoughts, the different contribution, and trying to have some whole picture getting out of it. I hope we succeeded in that. We're looking forward to hear more about ideas for new projects, talking about maturity of components, trying to, if you're looking for some prototype you want to test in the field, or if you have some funding available. Of course, some of our experimentation, and the same case for Richard, depending on the funding. So if you have ideas for new project, funding streams, or research or data, basically contact us for any type of collaboration. We'd be pleased to hear about your ideas.
Thank you so much, Tom. Samuel, Richard? Richard, you're on mute if you're, yeah.
I thought I'd push the button, but anyway, yeah, I was just saying, Lucia, thank you very much for this. It was actually quite interesting, and it gave me a chance to feel as though I was partly in Mexico for an hour. So
You're welcome anytime. Samuel?
Yeah, yes, thank you for the organization, and I think it's an ongoing work, and we are planning new publications this year. Like we talk about herds and dense population of animals. So it's still we have many years of future development. So yes, let's keep in touch.
Well, thank you so much again, and to all, remember that the content of the AI for Climate Global Forum is available online, and we will be sharing those links as well in the chat and in the video description. See you soon, and hope to talk to you ever again. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good
Bye.
evening.
yeah, bye-bye.